Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
Vanessa.
Cara.
You know how sometimes there are hard conversations?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Listeners, Vanessa and I adore each other, but we also have hard conversations because that's what you do when you're business partners and really close friends and you really respect each other. And one of the things that was super ironic about our most recent hard conversation is we were having it in the midst of scripting notes about how we were going to go through an episode about how to give information in ways people can hear it, which was highly ironic because we were trying to share with each other how we felt about something in ways the other one could hear it. And I'll raise my hand and say, I was not able to hear what you were saying very clearly with your words. And here we are, like having this one conversation with this one thing and also scripting this episode. And the irony, well, it was lost on me at the time, but it's not lost on me an hour later.
And I will just say, I was probably not saying things in a way that they were easy to hear or made sense. So apropos of this conversation, this episode, but also it is one of the ways in which doing the work that we do makes me a better person. Like
Totally.
it just does. I feel so lucky to do this work because I think it makes me a better friend. I think it makes me a better parent, hopefully. I think it makes me a better spouse. I think it makes me a better collaborator and team member and partner. And it's just such a gift. And we want to share that gift that we are continually working on and trying to get better at. We want to share it with you all because when it works, and it does sometimes work, giving information to other people in a way they can hear it, it is goddamn magic.
It is magic. And while this whole company that we've created, while this whole podcast that we record an endless number of episodes for, while it's all aimed at tweens and teens and the adults who love them, the topic of how to give information in the way that someone can receive it, first of all, just receive it. And then second of all, maybe act on it, maybe respond to it, right? Maybe not react to it, but consider it. That topic applies to absolutely every corner of life. And, you know, not atypical for us to cover something that has a very specific application in what we do, but also a very broad one. But this episode is that in spades. So we are going to walk through how to give information in ways that kids can receive it, hear it, hopefully, fingers crossed, do something about it, with it. But we're also going to weave in very relatable points, I hope relatable points about how this type of process applies to people of all ages, all stages, and in all circumstances.
So buckle up because some of it might feel a little bit familiar and maybe even a little personal. I promise this isn't directed at any one person specifically, but if my husband listened to this podcast, he might hear some tips in here for him.
Oh, I love when you say buckle up. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. So the starting point, as ever, is recognizing that it depends. It depends on temperament and personality of the kid. It depends on temperament and personality of the adult. And we're just going to give you a few categories, mostly because it's fun and entertaining for us, but also because it's very useful. So, Cara, I'll go through the kid categories and then you can go through the adult categories.
And before you jump in, just to clarifying sentence here, it depends means how you give that information. The style, the place, the tone, the length, that's what depends. And it's going to depend on this laundry list of things.
And how the other person responds to it.
Oh, yes, Vanessa.
Right. So we've got our sort of inquisitors, right? We've got the very curious, multiple question asking kids. We've got the reporters, the ones who come home with lots and lots of information that probably needs a little clarification. We need what I would call the quiet receivers, the ones who, are there and listening, but may not say a whole lot or, betray reactions at all. We've got the aggressors who are like, la, 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 don't talk to me, hands over ears. And then we've got the ones who go negative or defensive, who are like really shutting it down or pushing back in difficult ways. And Cara, it's so funny because of what we do. Our social media feed has a lot of sort of parenting influencers who go really negative about tweens and teens. And there's sort of, quote, funny memes that they post. And I really hate them. I really hate them because they like make it seem like it's all on the kids that they're not engaging or they're being complicated or difficult as if we're so perfect. I mean, let's be honest. So when we talk about kids who go negative or defensive, that's in a larger context of like other stuff going on. So this is not an episode where we're crapping on the kids.
Not at all. And in your list of personalities that you just rattled off, which was, I would say, top 4 or 5 of the countless number of personalities that are out there and combinations of personality traits.
And these are not scientific, psychologically based. This is like
you
fun
painted
categories.
Some pretty great broad strokes, like the reporters, the kid who's going to tell you everything. That changes the way you're going to talk to a kid versus, I love how you call them the quiet receivers. They're like, it's like they're a radio station, like they just take signal in and they give nothing back. And those of us who have had a kid like that or who have had a kid in a stage like that, the way you deliver information to that kid is so different than to your chatty Kathy. The go negative thing, oh, that is so real, Vanessa. There are so many people, I'm not going to even say kids, people who you can't even finish a sentence before no is coming out of their mouth or their hand is going up in a stop sign. And if I'm being honest, I was that person for a while in life. I was not always the chipper, cheery version of myself that you hear on this podcast.
Maybe it was through the 20 years of med school and training when you hadn't slept a full night in many months.
I might have been chronically sleep deprived, which we're going to talk about. But, I think there's a lot that goes into looking at the broad strokes of the person you have in front of you. I mean, you wouldn't engage in a confrontation or a hard conversation with an adult who is not receptive. So figuring out how to engage in a confrontation or a hard conversation, or frankly, a fun conversation, or even like a super light, silly conversation with a kid who's not in receiver mode, that's hard. And it sometimes really bums adults out. I'm going to flip the coin and talk about the adult personality and temperament situation, which really has an impact on the kids as communicators. So, full disclosure, you made this list. It's so awesome. I did not edit it. Those who know me know I edit everything.
Everything.
Everything. Like literally what Vanessa had for breakfast, I edit. And this list is amazing. So what are some of these broad strokes categories? You've got the nervous Nellies. I mean, they start with the helicopterers, but it just goes from there and snowballs. You've got the oversharers, right? The parents who cannot stop themselves. The dumpers. Now, the dumpers, they're not dumping their overshare, though they might. But really what they're doing is they're dumping their emotional baggage. They're dumping their own personal history. The person on the receiving end of that conversation is just better stand with their feet widespread and firmly planted because here it comes, right? The dumpers. you've got the avoiders who on first pass seem like the easiest type of adult to navigate because if they're avoidant, especially conflict avoidant, everything's going to be fine. Except anyone who has taken Psychology 101 knows not so much. And then, of course, there are the adults who go negative or get defensive. I have a personal funny story. My mom and I were having a conversation not too long ago, and she asked me if there was anything she might be able to change about herself. So that was an interesting prompt. It might have not been unsolicited, but she asked me if there was anything to change. And I said, you know, when I start to say something and you say, no, 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 no. And she said, I never do that. And I said, there are 5 no's and you do it in every conversation. She said, no, I do not. No, I do. And then she caught herself. And it was so interesting because I realized that the way I deliver information to her assumes a no before a yes. And once we could have the conversation about that, it actually got easier. We've been able to laugh about her no first, and she's gotten a lot better about it.
Yeah. I mean, with kids, I find they try to shut down the conversation. Sometimes it's negative, right? The examples we used earlier that they get, like the eye roll, the shrug, the slamming the door. But sometimes they shut down conversation in sort of charming ways or disarming ways. So we'll talk about that when you have something you really want to talk about and the conversation's being shut down, but you're not being triggered like, oh, I'm being chased by a caterpillar. For those of you who don't know, that's like my fear of the animal being chased by is a caterpillar. I know they're slow and
she's
small,
a mystery.
And I
People,
squash
she really
them.
is.
I'm sure there's some like trauma in my childhood, but you know, so you're not like in your fight, flight, or freeze, but you're being derailed, and we'll cover that version of shutting it down. And then, you know, there's a whole list of variables about how and why to have these conversations based on what else is going on inside a person, in the family, in the world, in life, right? So
are you going to read my list?
I'm going to read Cara's list because she put her own laugh line in
I did. Literally, I wrote, yes, I did.
In case I didn't get the joke. So time of day, right? So Cara knows in my house, my husband and I are both up at about 6 a.m. working independently.
Sleepers.
Parallel
Late
play.
sleepers.
I know. We're so like, the Nattersons are up at like 4:30 or 5. But I don't talk to my husband. I get a kiss hello, and then we sit on our laptops in separate parts of the kitchen, not speaking to each other and drinking our coffee. And then like within like 40 minutes, we can have a conversation. So time of day. But like at the end of the day, he wants to chat with me. But I don't want to chat with him because I'm exhausted. And
I've been talking to you all day long.
And so it's like you have to find your sweet spots for conversation. That's right. True with kids, obviously, too. You try to have a conversation with them when they've just walked in from school and they're hungry and sweaty and stressed about their work. You are not going to have a productive conversation. Here's Cara's laugh line. Time of the month. Ha, 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 ha. In case I didn't get the joke.
I mean, it's so simple.
Yeah. I mean, if someone's about to get their period, you can, you may get a reaction or have a kind of conversation that's not super productive either in you or in the kid. And if you're going through menopause, well, that's a whole other set of circumstances.
And I'll say that for a long time, even acknowledging the hormonal fluctuations throughout the month was totally third rail. Like, you're not supposed to go there. It's anti-feminist, whatever it is. I totally disagree. And in my own house, the lines of communication have been thrown wide open by acknowledging what is happening hormonally. So my daughter will sometimes say, you do not want to engage with me right now because I'm telling you I'm about to get my period. And I am not going to respond in my best way. And she is not blaming her body or shaming her body. She is acknowledging that she does not love the way her brain feels at this particular moment. And she's gotten so good at it and then circling back that it's made me rethink how we all approach that topic. Because I think this topic of sort of PMS and mood swings around periods has been weaponized against women for a long time, but it can be used for good. By the way, there's an incredible history around how women could come together and actually advocate for themselves by leaning into their periods. We've talked about this on prior episodes, but this is the origin of the outside of some women's restrooms. There's like an extra sort of anteroom. And that anteroom, the history of that room in some buildings is that unions demanded it and required it for women to gather because women quote unquote complained about needing a space when they had their period. They needed a space to lie down. And what were they doing? They were flipping the system to their benefit, and they would congregate in these spaces and they would make change. They were actually taking a negative stereotype and flipping it in the most incredible way. And so I sort of laugh and also really hail what women have done around this whole concept of period stigma. The last variables that really do change the way conversations work: stress load in life, like whatever it is, for a kid, for an adult, there are a million stressors, right? Tests and work deadlines and need to get to the grocery store and, need to pay bills and stressed about paying bills and all the things. Then there's sleep deprivation, which is real. And we've done a number of episodes on sleep, but we can never do enough because sleep, being unconscious, is as important as what we do when we're conscious. Our bodies need regular sleep and deep sleep. And then, of course, the fifth bullet on the list is every other circumstance in life. So, you can't, as you're trying to engage with someone, kid or adult, don't do it in a vacuum. Recognize the drivers of the situation around you. Recognize the variables that are going to change things. If you've got one foot out the door to go to a family party, a graduation, a huge Sentinel event, that's not the time to pick the fight, even though it's the time that so many of us pick the fight, right? So that's my list.
Okay, so we've got the sort of the wraparound. We've got the personalities and the temperaments and the setting and the stressors. And now we're going to offer the tenets, which I realize that I misspelled on our list. I spelled it like tenants, like people living in our house as opposed to principles. But it is actually a nice play on words here.
Yeah, that's very deeply ironic.
So one is a tenet that we talk about all the time. And whenever we get interviewed, and they say, what are the 3 takeaways people should have? And we always laugh because we know one of us is going to do one and one of us is going to do the other. But in this case, the one that really, really matters, the one that we all suck at, the one that we all need to improve at is the listen more, lecture less. Because we all talk too much when we talk to kids. And they get better at sort of sitting still and not fidgeting or leaving the room or exploding, but it doesn't mean they're actually taking on board what we're telling them. So, Cara, you want to talk a little bit about when the rubber meets the road, what that looks like?
Well, I want to, yes, and I want to scaffold it with a couple of other things. One way that you can listen more and talk less is to ask a question. Because you're prompting the other person in the conversation to do the talking at that point. Those of you who have silent people living with you, sometimes that's painful, but they will not feel welcome to speak in the conversation sometimes unless you open the door with questions. The other, and this is a lesson hard learned with Vanessa, because she's the best person at giving me feedback on this. Don't interrupt. Don't interrupt.
Oh, wait, I forgot to tell you. I saw this article that was about, it was like people who interrupt a lot are not being rude.
No, we're not.
We
care.
They care. They're worried they're going to forget what they're going to say.
We are.
And they probably have a lot of anxiety.
Yes, we do. And I'm going to some maybe some attentional issues. And right. I'm going to circle back to the top, which is I do believe interrupters are so engaged in the content of the conversation that they want to move the conversation in a certain direction. And if I were to choose between an interrupter and an unengaged person, I would choose the interrupter. But it doesn't mean that interruption is good. And frankly, it stops the goal of listening more and talking less. How can you talk less if you interrupt?
I think the rule of thumb with kids is just if they're talking, just do not interrupt them, ever. If you're in a conversation with a friend or a colleague or a spouse, it's two adults, two equals, it's different. But with a kid, if they are talking, just let them talk. And
I'm raising my hand. Okay, here's my question, Vanessa. What does one do when a child does not stop talking?
So it depends on, are there other people in the room who should get a chance to talk, right? So if, let's say you're at the dinner table and a topic comes up and you have one who's just like the Energizer Bunny and is just talking, and you're not getting a chance to ask the same question or ask the opinion of the other people at the table, and you don't want to shut down your Energizer Bunny, but you also want to make space for your silent receiver, then you just say, I so want to hear what you have to say, and I love your enthusiasm. I just want to make a little room for some other people at the table. Can you hold on to what you were saying? If you can't remember, go grab a piece of paper and write it down, and I promise I will come back to you.
I like that a lot.
You're validating that you care what they have to say, but you also have to make space. And for those of you who met Bear and Rye, our two second children on the podcast, you might imagine
they need
space and time. They are silent receivers, and they have other family members who are reporters and inquisitors. And sometimes I have actively had to make space to be able to engage with Bear in conversation, either to give him specific information or to hear from him. And you might be wondering, if we're imparting information, right? If we're giving kids information in ways they can hear it, why are we listening more and talking less? That will make sense in just a second when we talk about how you get into these conversations.
But I want to just add before we move to that, it is hard if you've ever been at the front of a classroom, if you've ever led a Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop, coached a team, if you are someone who runs anything that involves theater, that involves groups of kids, there's always one kid who they have so much to say.
Right.
They just can't stop.
One of us might have been that kid, and one of us might be raising.
Might have been that kid.
We might be raising a child in our house who is that kid. And the skill that they have to learn is to harness that interest and engagement and creativity and desire to participate. They have to harness it and channel it and be able to not just make space for themselves, but make space for other people in the conversation.
And sometimes it involves holding a mirror up or being really real about how other people receive the extra verbiage, I'll say. And the way I see that happen most often is one sibling will turn to another sibling and they will just shut it down, or a classmate. And sometimes it's not so kind. And so getting into conversation with your talker about the value of actually listening more and talking a little bit less, not silencing them, but finding a way for them to find balance really helps them socially. Because when kids finally, it's sort of like when a kid smells and someone else says, you smell, it's both extraordinarily effective and oftentimes feels really bad. So that's true of this as well. Another one of your tenets, Vanessa, which I totally agree with, is to find the starting place of the kid before you dive in. Now, we've done lots of episodes that sort of center around this theme of figure out where they're at, and you always have me do it. So I'm just going to do it. I do this thing where if I'm not sure what a kid is really asking or what their baseline knowledge is, I will say, do you want to do me doing the question,
do you.
Vanessa? Okay.
That's so interesting. What made you ask that? That's my calm Cara
melodic
voice.
Am I ever that calm?
Yes. So that's your radio voice. That's what you sound like when we record ads.
I know. On the next ad break, you'll be hearing me do that voice. But really, the leveling of figuring out where they're coming from so that you can respond and direct the conversation in the right general orientation is really, really important.
Very important. But sometimes in our excitement to deliver the information, we skip that step and we start telling them or answering questions that they're not even asking. There may be no harm, right? Like, okay, it's information they need. Or they may not be developmentally at the place where they can hear our answers to stuff, which relates to the next tenet, which is remember kids' developmental stage, their attention span, where they are sort of in their relationships and understanding of relationships. So, an 8-year-old, you've got them for about 3 minutes of giving them information before they are like gonzo, back to playing ball or, petting the dog. With older kids, as they get older, and I have to see, somebody once gave us a guide of like what a kid's attention is at different stages. It's hard to imagine that it can be
that it was
so
based
blanket.
In science.
Yeah, I mean that it's so blanket because kids are so different, and then you've got like ADHD, and you've got like
that's some healthy skepticism right there, Vanessa.
Yeah. So, but generally, just keep it short. And if they're interested, and you can always give them a few sentences and say, "Do you have any questions?" And if they're still engaged, then they'll ask more questions, and other kids will come back to you a week later with questions, and that's also cool because like. It may take them a little while to process what they've heard.
And to those of you who hear something come out of your kid's mouth and think, oh my God, I have the smartest, deepest, most thoughtful child on the face of the earth. What they just said was nothing short of brilliant, which by the way, I think we've all had moments where we're like, wow, our kid, right? We've had plenty of the opposite moments too. Don't get me wrong. But for those of you who are in a moment with your kid where they seem incredibly on it, remember their developmental stage. Remember that no matter how brilliant and insightful it sounds, it's coming out of the mouth of a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 17-year-old. It's just, you just have to check yourself at the door as the listener. That
reminds me of those like beginning of the year coffees where they like, talk about like, oh, well, 5th graders are doing this and this is normal, or 3rd graders are doing that, or 9th graders are doing that. And there was always that parent in the room who raised their hand and they're like, what if you have an exceptionally gifted child?
What if your child is more special than everyone else?
What if your child is just the most special and they've read every book in the Library of Congress? Like, how do you make space for those exceptional children?
And now I'm going to turn on my empathy switch because I've always felt for these parents. Like, on the one hand, it's really annoying. And on the other hand, I totally get it.
What? Like it's so hard to have an exceptional child?
No, but like, I think evolutionarily, we are designed to believe that the people who we have to clothe and feed and protect are special.
Right. Because otherwise, like, why would you give a shit?
I mean, forget it. Right.
So, and I'm not being, and by the way, there are exceptional children in all different ways. And mine are exceptional in very secret ways that only I can see. But
the rest of the world has yet to discover.
Right. I mean, there are children really who are really exceptional. I just think like when you're in a group setting, you don't need to ask that question. Like I remember once
it's a humble brag.
It's a humble brag. But regardless of how exceptional your child is, you cannot dump all the information on them at once. They are still kids. They are still chronologically their age. And by the way, define the terms that you use. Like, we forget there's language that we use that kids have never encountered before. They literally don't know what it means. And we have to define them. Or
okay, I have the best story. I've told you about my neighbor before, who's this, we live across the street from a family with 3 truly wonderful, wonderful girls. And the oldest one was reading War and Peace in the 4th grade. Okay. Walking down the sidewalk, I called her mother. I said, she's going to get killed if she does not look up from her book because she does not notice cars. But she's like, truly, this was her internal fire lighting this path. She called me. The daughter called me when she was in about 10th grade. And she said, can I come over? And I said, sure. And she came over and asked me questions about anatomical terms that no one had ever defined for her. This is a kid who read War and Peace in the 4th grade. No one had ever told her. She's like, what's a vagina? What's a vulva? I don't understand. No one talks about it. I need help. And I was
you're like, honey, you're not alone. 90% of the adults in this world don't know the difference
so
between
no
a vulva
matter
and
how
vagina.
Exceptional, you are right, Vanessa.
And everyone has their, their blank spaces where they need help filling in. And kids love learning new vocabulary words. Like it lights their fire.
Vulva.
Especially vulva or other wonderful words that we use frequently. So yes, define your terms.
Okay. So we have laid out 3 tenets: listen more, talk less, find their starting point before you dive in, and remember their developmental stage. And also parenthetically, how much attention they can focus on a given topic. Okay. Now we're moving into the things that you can do as the adult in the situation to right something when it's gone a little bit wrong. So the first one, and we won't spend a lot of time on it because we have literally a zillion podcasts about this, is to remember to use your do-over.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, don't lie ever, ever, ever. If you find yourself in a lie, if you catch yourself in a lie, own it as soon as possible, apologize, maybe even explain why you lied. So maybe it has something to do with, I don't know, a bad decision you made recently and you felt embarrassed at being the adult and having made a bad decision and you lied about it because you feel like as an adult, you should model for your kids never messing up. This is a great opportunity to model for them what it looks like to mess up and to own it. And to apologize for being dishonest. If you misinform, right? Your kid asks you a question, you answer the question and you got it wrong, own it. Go back and say,
oh my God, I do that every day. Every day.
I don't feel like I misinform. I feel like I lose it. And then I have to apologize. Last night, absolutely lost it with one of my kids, to the point where I walked out of the room. Like I lost it and then I walked out of the room and I went upstairs. And the funny thing is there was a sports game on upstairs and the same sports game was on downstairs. And so I lost it while the kid was watching the sports game. And then I went upstairs to go cool down in another room where the same sports game was on because the one kid won't watch the sports games with the other members of the family because apparently we're too annoying. There you go.
Weird and annoying.
So I cool down and then I go back downstairs to apologize and to have, a more constructive conversation. But it was like this very meta moment. Like it was like a Charlie Kaufman movie where I'm like moving spaces, but the same movie is playing. But I took a do-over. I owned it. I gave some positive feedback that I had been wanting to give that got overtaken by
by all the negative feelings,
by me losing it. I'm pretty good at when I get asked a question saying, I don't know. I'm not in the position you're in, Cara, of being a physician where it feels like I should really know the answer to stuff.
I don't know is my favorite phrase of all time. I use it every single day. but I find my subtle word choice is wrong on a daily basis. Like I have one friend from medical school who spoke so slowly and intentionally, and every word she ever chose was correct. And I always envied it. And I always said, I'm going to be more like that. Which is, sometimes in these podcasts, Vanessa, when I slow down and and you're like, this is so weird. You're pacing so different because sometimes you're so fast. And sometimes I try to channel my inner Risa because she took a minute. She chose her words carefully and she never said that which she didn't intend to say. And I find so often I am saying that which I don't mean to say. I choose one word that's a little wrong or something that's slightly off. And then I constantly rerouting, assessing and shifting a little and correcting. And, and it's
you
all
do
part
that when
and parcel.
You write also.
Oh my God. Right.
I mean, listeners,
all the time.
If you want to go through a writer's workshop, sit with Cara because I swear she will write it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And it ends up amazing. I mean, it's great, but it's very deliberative.
Sometimes you would just sit back and watch. I'm
I don't care. Put whatever, any words you want. Just be done with it.
So take the do-over is a great strategy that, we beat to death in this podcast, and it's for good reason. It works really well in life. It works well. It's never too late to course correct. It's just never too late. Another tenet is to strip the shame and judgment. I mean, best if you don't lead with shame and judgment, but if it has crept in, okay, acknowledge it and drop it.
Right. I mean, this is a really hard one because kids are living very different lives than we lived. So the way they dress, the devices they use, the ways in which they socialize. I mean, there's many, many ways that their lives are almost incomprehensible to us. And it's really tempting to judge them. I'm thinking about this morning when my kid was going downstairs in a pair of pants that could be generously described as wide leg sweatpants, but others might describe as essentially a pair of pajama pants. And not only that, they were really wrinkled. And I was like, are you going to school in those? And the poor kid is exhausted. She's a crazy day. It was not helpful. It was not helpful. And she looked at me and she was like, yep. And I said, okay, if I had it to do over again, which I will own tonight when she gets home at God knows what time, I will say to her, you know what? It really wasn't so helpful for me to criticize or question what you were wearing this morning. Where that question was actually coming from was, are you going to have an issue getting dress coded today? Because you're not allowed to wear ripped sweatpants to school.
You know how I know that I live in LA and you live in New York? We went shopping this past weekend because my daughter has an internship this summer and she needs business casual or work casual clothes. And we tried on a zillion different things. By we, I mean she tried on a zillion different things. And the two things we landed on that we both loved, one was a pair of black sort of work trousers, if you will. They're right, exactly what you're imagining in your mind's eye. And the other was a pair of pants, linen drawstring. And she came out of the dressing room and she's like, I'm pretty sure these are pajama pants. And I was like, but they look amazing. And she threw on a sweater and I was like, you could totally wear that to work. So, LA, New York. But
LA, New York.
It is true that the issue with the shaming and the judgment is that we close the door to communication. So if the goal is to communicate, that is like a slam shut deadbolt, right?
Right. I mean, let's say you've got a kid going out for the night and you're not crazy about the kids they're going out with. And you're trying to communicate with them, hey, I'm here if you need me. Hey, I'm a little concerned about the plan for this evening. Can we come up with some contingency plans? hey, maybe we should have a code word if things go sideways. All of the sort of forethought and constructive conversation we want to have with kids. But when the worry seeps in,
That's what comes out.
What comes out is more like, I don't like those kids you're going out with. I think they're bad news. I don't even think you should be friends with them. I don't know why I'm letting you go out tonight. Actually, maybe I should make you stay home.
Okay,
right? It's like the litany of stuff.
Okay, but let's pause here because I think this is a great moment to analyze where you can go in the conversation because it's not super clear. So on the one hand, by not saying that, sure, you're not shaming, but you're not raising the flag that you feel as the adult in the situation you need to raise. Like there's a flag you want to raise there that says, hey, my job is to keep you safe and healthy. And I'm not feeling like I'm doing my job super well when you're hanging out with people who aren't making great decisions. Like, so why you say it makes perfect sense, and not saying it can almost feel wrong, but saying it feels more wrong.
That's right. So what you actually want to do is build the reflexive quality in your own kid to have the analysis, to have the attunement to their own gut and their own decision making. So instead of like, you do this, I think that, here's my opinion, just vomiting all this stuff on them, it's really about, all right, let's be honest here. The kids you're going out with tonight, how would you describe them? And a kid will often be honest and be like, yeah, they don't always make the best decisions. Right. So like, let's recognize that. Knowing that, what are some things you can get in place so that if things go sideways, you've got a plan and you can get in touch with me?
I mean, you get an A+ for that. And I would just add one caveat that there's a swath of parents, myself included, who would say, if you're asking my opinion, do I think there's a different pace that you might rather operate at? And if you find kids who are doing something that's a little bit, over here and not over here, that you might have more fun, that is another way you can go in that conversation. But the conversation has to start exactly where you started it. And frankly, it's fun. Like,
it's seductive.
It's the best set of conversations I ever have with my kids. They're like, okay, guys, let's be honest. Like,
right. And they will be honest.
They will be totally honest.
And then they probably will still go. And the nice thing about having it that way is they will then come home and say, you know what, you're not going to guess what happened. Like, you totally predicted it. And it's a very funny thing when you actually make space for them, where you give them some information and you make space for them to react and respond. All of a sudden, your relationship is so much deeper than if you had just given the information. And it's really interesting. One of my kids is traveling very far away in a place where I just read an article about ethanol poisoning. This is a kid who's of age to drink alcohol. And there was an article about how in some of these countries, there's poisoning. They use like antifreeze and stuff like that instead of actual alcohol, and that people have been dying. And I'm like, okay, here I am, like textbook mom from Less Awkward. Like, I'm totally going to send you this text in WhatsApp, not knowing at all if he's going to read it, if he's going to respond to it, nothing. And I sent it and I was like, hey, I just came across this. I just want you to know this is on my mind. And he wrote back and he said, hey, I think that means I should probably be drinking bottled beer in these countries. And I had made no suggestion. I had not given him any directives. I just presented him with the information. Again, this kid is thousands and thousands of miles away, and he came up with a solution. And I was like, oh, I was prepared to be rejected summarily or ignored, but this actually worked.
Now, I want to give a pro tip, which is if the only place that we focus our energy is on those scary shares, the poisonings, the fatal this, the overdose that, eventually they lose their resonance. So important to also share slug videos.
Oh, sloths.
And yes.
Dachshunds.
Yes, all of it. Important to share silly memes. Important to share news articles that are relevant to you, or, whatever it is, you got to have some balance in there. I shared a video last night with Vanessa of one of my dogs choking another one of my dogs. She did not find it very funny, but I felt like it counterbalanced a lot of the really serious stuff I send her.
And I thought one dog was humping the other. So there you go. I mean, we all see it through our lens,
we're deep in our curriculum. So I understand why you're doing that, Vanessa.
And that actually is a great place to land, which is that it's not about us, that we see these conversations through our own lenses, right? Cara's like, what do you mean you didn't watch the video that I sent you? Like, isn't the video I sent you so important to you?
The center of your universe? I don't understand.
Doesn't it mean as much to you as it does to me? And that same lesson can be applied to when we talk to kids about stuff. We want it to be this like deep, meaningful exchange. We want them to see the gravity and the importance and the meaning and in the conversation and the way that we do. And I got like some news for you. That is not happening. And it's not about us. It's not about our experience in the information. It's not about satisfying our emotional needs or any of that. It's about getting the information to the kid and making sure they have it so they can be safe and healthy. It's not about like, oh my God, I am succeeding as a parent and aren't I wonderful and aren't we so close now? That will happen naturally as you more and more engage with your kid, but to make it about you is totally besides the point.
I mean, I had an experience with one of my kids when they came home from college recently, and they thanked me for not being their friend.
Wow.
And said to me, we will be better friends now that I am more adult because you weren't trying to be my friend when I was a kid. And it was really profound, and I felt totally seen. And it is possible that they also asked for something later in the conversation, but I don't think they were buttering me up. I think it was true.
That's so funny because that's why I lost it with my kid is when they overstepped and asked for something after what they thought was a great preparatory,
prep. But I do think, and this sort of sums up the entire podcast in one neat little box with a bow on it, which is not only is it not about us, but it's entirely about them. It's our job with respect to them is to keep them safe and healthy. And so we are doing the best we can to take them from being fully dependent to fully independent. And it's really, really hard sometimes to gauge how we're doing in that process and how they're doing in that process when we're in it all day, every day. It's like you don't see things grow and change when they're in front of your eyes all the time. You don't always recognize sort of the stew that you're living in. And so if you can remove yourself and not make this about you, and instead you can make the goal communicating clearly so that, yes, eventually you will have that relationship that you are going for. You will. It is doable. It is achievable. But first and foremost, you're parenting them or you're adulting them or you're trusted adulting them or whatever applies to you. That's today's job. And hopefully this conversation paves the way a little bit more.
Thanks, Cara.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.